best of care of you as we can. Now, first off, let me ask, do you have any English speakers here in the boat? Amazing. Har vi nogle danskere i båden? Ja. Fedt. Haben wir Deutsche am Bord? Fantastisch. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Kann wir Englisch sprechen? Ja, das ist gut. Fantastisch. Dankeschön. Now, we are going to be crossing through some bridges. It makes sense. We are in a canal, so that is going to eventually occur. So when we do so, some of these are quite low. So when we do cross these low bridges, I'm going to have to ask you, all of you, to keep your arms, legs, feet, head, everything that can stick outside of the boat, inside of the boat, so nobody gets their head dunked or hurt or anything else. Alright, we're gonna do it solely in English. Amazing. Then I'm gonna be able to go into great detail about every single house, so that's amazing. Now, we start off a tour here in Nyhavn, or New Harbor in English. Now, the name itself is quite ironic because it in no way is a new harbor at all. It was built during the 1670s and is one of the oldest parts of the city. It was dug out by Swedish prisoners of war, in fact, so this entire canal here is artificial, as you'll see with a bunch of the other canals as well. Now, we have the bridge coming up real quick, so let's just practice once. Just keep your head down. Amazing. Now, you may have been wondering during your stay here in Copenhagen, Nyhavn, it's so colorful. Every little house has its own color. And you may wonder, why is that? Is it because that it's Pride Day every year, every day of the year? Or is it because of their love of colors? No, it actually isn't. It's because back in the day, the only thing that you had were street names. So what you'd say, in fact, was, I don't live in Nyhavn number something something. You'd say, I live in Nyhavn, the yellow house, or the red house, or the green house, or the round house. Actually, back in the day, this part of town wasn't very nice. It was actually kind of known as a slum. That's because there were all these drunken sailors, and with them there came a lot of prostitutes as well. This was a very industrial harbor, but as you can see, this entire thing has been renovated and stays as beautiful and as colorful as ever. Island. one side of the river to the other. So, for example, from Nyhavn to the Opera or anything else like that. They're part of Copenhagen's extensive public transportation system, one which we are very proud of. Out in the background here, you can see a silver chimney with smoke coming up. This is actually a burning facility where Copenhagen burns most of its trash. So what we'll do is burn trash, and then that trash and the heat from the trash is then generated into energy, which the city uses. Also about this building, on top of it and also on the back side of the building, there is an artificial skiing loop. So if you want to take a quick tour with some skis, if you pack your skis for a ski, stay here in Copenhagen. I know just the place. Now we are entering the area around Holm. Holm used to be a military facility, actually the naval base of the Danish fleet. Now, the Navy moved out during the 1970s, but until then it had been used to house the Danish fleet for centuries. Now, however, only a few parts of the Danish defense still remains here. For an example, the military diving school is here, as well as an extensive museum and the military police. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but behind the great big French ship, there is a U-boat. This U-boat is known as the Seal, and is the only was the last commissioned submarine by the Danish Navy. It last saw service during the Iraq War in the early 2000s, where it was out in the water, keeping an eye out for enemy vessels. The large yellow building you can see here to the right, with the wooden structure, with the metal structure on top, actually is an old mast crane. Back in the day, when ships were powered by wind and had these massive sails, this crane here would be used to hoist the mast upright on the ship so that it could sail perfectly. Now to a more modern ship, the great big gray ship you can see here to your side, the gray one with the F-352 on the side, is the Danish frigate known as Scum. Now, for many years, it served as the pride of the Danish Navy, sailing faithfully across the waters around the world, until a fateful day just a few decades ago, where it by accident fired a missile into a vacation house area in the north of Zealand. It blew up 4 houses, but luckily it was out of season, so nobody got hurt. But it was still quite an embarrassment for the Danish Navy, so ever since then it's been known as the Oopsie missile incident. Here on our right as well, you can see a much more decorated ship. This is the Royal Yacht, called Dannebro, named after the Danish flag. Now, the royal family uses this whenever they go on state visits. For example, the king and the queen went to Norway and Sweden just recently for their first official state visit using this very ship. out here, as well as paintball and laser tag. Just to your right, you'll also be able to see a large crane. This is Copenhagen bungee jump. So from here, you can jump at a height of 69 meters with a rubber band around your ankles if you are so inclined. Inspired by the Danish fairy tale of the very same name. The original fairy tale was written by Hans Christian Andersen, and the statue itself was built in 1913. Now, the original fairy tale is actually quite a tragic one. It's about this sea princess, this daughter of Neptune, who falls in love with a prince on land. However, love doesn't last. She loses him, and in pure sorrow and sadness, she jumps out into the waves, dissipating into sea foam. However, in the end, she does turn into a sea nymph, which is a version of a happy ending, if you may say so. A lot has happened to her during her years out here. The rock which she sits on has been blown up once. She's been decapitated twice. And she's also been put in a burqa during the Mohammed crisis in the early 2000s. Fun fact, even though she is one of the most renowned tourist attractions here in Copenhagen, she's also been voted as one of the most disappointing ones to visit. This may be because of her height. She's only about 4 feet tall, but I would like to remind you that if she were any larger, she wouldn't be known as the Little Mermaid, she would be known as the Big Mermaid. So there's a good reason for that. Now, also on your right side, you'll be able to see these great hills of 110,000 employees. The building itself is known as the building with the blue eyes, and this is because of the tint in the windows, this blue tint, which creates this feeling that when you're looking at it, about 1,000 blue eyes are staring right back at you. Ivory and sugar and coffee and the likes. We had a colony in India, one in West Africa, and one in the Caribbean as well. Today, however, colonialism is a thing of the past. Thank God for that. So these buildings have different purposes now. The two most to your left have been converted into luxury apartments, and the building most to your right is an art exhibition, as you can see, with the statue of Michelangelo's David just out front. Whether or not a family member is home by whether or not they have a flag up on their flagpole. As you can see today, no flags up, nobody's home. Through Amalienborg you can see this large dome structure. This is the marble church. It can boast about having the largest dome in all of Northern Europe. And together with Amalienborg Palace and the opera, they kind of formed this cultural trinity, and this is by design. Originally, Amalienborg wasn't built for the royal family. It was built for 4 noble families, and thus why there are 4 identical palaces. But when Christiansborg burned down back in the day, the royal family had to move out. So they bought the most expensive place they could find, which at the time was Amalienborg, and they have lived there ever since. Also, in the middle of Amalienborg, you'll see a statue of King Frederick V. Now, the statue itself is pointed towards the marble church. To represent the king's obedience and his faith in God. Also, an interesting fact: the rear end of the horse is pointed towards Sweden. So take with that as you want. here, sitting just by the harbor, especially during the evenings when the sunset hits. From here you can enjoy food from all over the world and just generally have a really great time with your friends, if you're visiting with them, that is. Now, the bridge we have up here is known as the Butterfly Bridge, and that's because of the way it looks when the bridge goes up to let the boats through. This bridge is also quite low, so as we practiced it, keep your head down, arms inside the boat, and don't try to touch it. Please and thank you. We have now left Copenhagen's inner harbor, and we are traveling through Christianshavn, or Christian Tower, named after the king who built it, King Christian IV. It takes inspiration from the city of Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands. And this was because the King Christian IV, wanted to kind of lure the Dutch merchants here to Copenhagen as well as their business. However, he failed spectacularly in that regard. Though he tried, he offered about 12 years of free rent for any Dutch person who moved here. However, as I said before, that did not work either. He actually bankrupted most of Denmark trying to build as much as he did. And by the end of his reign, Denmark as a nation officially declared bankruptcy. However, he is also the reason why this tour is as wonderfully long as it is, because it built most of Copenhagen, as well as all the buildings we can now enjoy here today. Now, you may be wondering, how is the water here in Copenhagen so clean? Like usually harbor water is something smelly and muddy and stuff like that. And I can tell you that this wasn't always how it was. Back in the day, Denmark or Copenhagen's water was notoriously filthy. Actually, some parents warned their children about not staying too close to the harbor for a longer period of time because they were afraid of them catching something that may be lying in the water, disease or bacteria and the likes. But due to extensive renovation projects by the Copenhagen municipality as well as the Danish government, the harbor today is one of the cleanest in the entire world. So clean that you can actually bathe in most of it. The only places where you can't bathe is because of the boat traffic, and we don't want anybody run over by a boat. But on our left side we have this large spire sticking up into the sky. This is the spire of Vor Kirke, or the Church of Our Savior. Now I'm going to be talking a bit more about it when we cross this bridge. It is right up here. But as you can see, there is this large statue on top of the spire. This is a statue of Jesus. Though it looks small from here, it actually stands about 3 meters tall.
Going
another bridge, so please do keep your arms, heads, and legs inside the boat while we're crossing under. Thank you. Now, right here to your left, you get a very good look at the Church of Our Savior. The spire, the iconic spiral spire, wasn't actually added until later on. It was added to commemorate the victory of Christianity in Europe after the Holy Roman Empire won a large battle against the Ottoman Empire, which is modern-day Turkey. Now, there's this story about the spire, which isn't true, mind you, but it is a good one. It's about how, if you've noticed, the stair goes left around the tower, not right, which back in the day symbolized a satanic thing. And when the builder of the spire noticed this, he, as the story goes, jumped out from the very top of the building because he could not live with his shame. That is, however, just a story. Nobody has jumped out from the tower. But we do have another bridge, so keep your arms, heads, and legs inside the boat while we're crossing. Thank you. Of this particular part of the city, the next part of the tour will be silent, but it is also a quite spectacular part of the tour because of the architecture around here. So please do talk amongst yourselves and enjoy the beautiful houses. Thank you. in front of us, you'll be able to see a building, a black building. This building is known as the Black Diamond. It's the modern part of the Royal Library here in Copenhagen. The old part is just behind it, and it is made of this red brick, which is also quite beautiful. Now, this building in particular is interesting because of the architecture, and also the reason why it's called the Black Diamond is because on a very sunny day, the water will shine down onto the water and then be thrown up against the facade of the building, which is angled in such a way to catch the sunlight, creating this shining, glimmering effect on the facade of the building. It shines bright like a diamond, as Rihanna said, and that's why it's called the Black Diamond. Just behind the Black Diamond, you'll see this red brick building. That's the old part of the Royal Library. And just behind the Royal Library, you'll see some trees. This is the library garden, which is also open to the public and has some very beautiful plants. And it's a nice, quiet place to enjoy lunch or just a few minutes in peace if ever you are in need, if you're in Copenhagen. Now, the green building here to our left is Blocks. It's home to the DAC, which is the Danish Architecture Center, which has an open museum and an open exhibit if ever you are so inclined. But in the meantime, we do have another bridge, so please keep your arms, heads, and legs inside the boat. Thank you. This red brick building we have here to our right is the old brewery of Copenhagen. It was built by King Christian IV, and back in the day it was used to produce around 10 liters of beer per sailor in Copenhagen a day. This was because back in the day, as I mentioned earlier, the water was quite filthy here in Copenhagen. So instead of drinking this water, making the sailors sick, they produced these 10 liters of beer a day for them to drink, which surprisingly was healthier and also quite addictive. Now, the tile roof on it is also very impressive. Back when it was first constructed, it was the largest tile roof in all of Northern Europe. And while it no longer has that record, it is still quite impressive to think about. Coming up on our right, you'll be able to see two pavilions again, as well as directly ahead of us, a bridge. This is known as the Marble Bridge, and together with the two pavilions on the right bank of the river, these are the only remaining parts of the original Christiansborg Castle, which burned down during the 1700s. Now, we will be going over to the other side of this island called Slotsholmen, or Castle Island. And I would like you to remember I would like you to notice the stark contrast between the white, smooth facade of the old Christiansborg in contrast to the new, darker, granite one of the new Christiansborg. Now, to Denmark. This, back in the day, was known as the Palace of the Prince, where the Crown Prince used to live when Christiansborg was the home of the royal family. However, when it burned down, the Crown Prince, it didn't make sense for him to stay here anymore, so he moved to Amalienborg with the rest of the royal family. This bridge here is called the Storm Bridge. I don't know why it's called that in any particular reason, but I do know that it is quite narrow and very low. So it's really important here that you keep your hands inside the boat, don't try to touch the bridge, and keep your hand down as well. During his later years, he returned to good old Denmark, where he also passed on. Now, despite being just able to boast about having his own museum, a feat which many few artists have accomplished, he can also brag about being the only non-Catholic artist ever to have a statue featured in the St. Peter's Church in Rome. Coming up on our right, you'll also be able to see Gammel Strand, or Old Beach. This was where, back in the day, the official city limits were. It's also here that all the fisher wives would kind of like park their boats and sell the catch of their husbands. And this wasn't actually very long ago. The last fisher wife moved out from Gammel Strand here in 2008. Just up here, we also have a statue commemorating this woman, the last fisher wife. Also, directly ahead to your left, you'll be able to see a statue of a warrior on horseback. This is Bishop Absalon, the supposed founder of Copenhagen. He was granted the fiefdom of Copenhagen when he supported the King Valdemar in his power struggle. It was also here on Castle Island, or Slotsholmen, he built his first castle. Now we do have another bridge, so you know the drill. Keep your arms, heads and legs inside the boat. Thank you. Now, here to your right, you'll be able to see Christiansborg Castle, the new modern one. And I say modern because it's the newest castle on this island. It's the 6th castle that has been placed here. For centuries, this has been the center of power in Denmark. First by hosting the King's Palace, and now it hosts the Danish Parliament, as well as the office of the Prime Minister and the Supreme Court as well. Now, as I said, I would like you to notice the stark difference between the pure white facade and the bit of the old Christiansborg Castle, and in contrast to the much more dark granite one. Also a fun fact about Christiansborg here, its foundation is laid of, it consists of a stone from each municipality here in Denmark, kind of symbolizing the importance of democracy. Just in front of Christiansborg, you'll be able to see a statue of a king on horseback. This is King Frederick VII, who was the last king with the absolute power of monarchy here in Denmark. During his reign in 1849, he signed the Danish Constitution, handing over the power of government back to the people. You'll be able to see Holmens Kirke, or the Church of the Island. It was constructed back in King Christian IV's time, so it's about 400 years old. And to our right, you are able to see what remains of the old Copenhagen Stock Exchange, which was actually one of the oldest buildings here in Copenhagen just until recently. Unfortunately, it burned down just a few weeks ago, and this is what remains. It was supposed to have its 400th year anniversary here in September, but as you can see, that is no longer on the calendar. Some good news about this whole situation is that the guy who owns the building, the head of the Danish industry, has said that the entire thing will be rebuilt brick by brick. Quite ironically, it had a spire, or iconic spire, in the middle of the building, which consisted of about 3 dragons representing Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. This spire was supposed to keep fires away, actually, and that fire is exactly what destroyed the building, unfortunately. During renovation work, no less. Now, the building to your left, you can see here, is the National Bank of Denmark. It was designed by Arne Jacobsen, the famous Danish architect and a furniture designer as well. Now, this is a bit of a controversial building, mainly because of some people think it is a modern piece of art, of architecture, just like the Opera of Copenhagen, and some people think it is very ugly to look at. However, that is a matter of personal opinion, so I'll leave that entire thing up to you. Currently under the jurisdiction of our foreign minister, Rasmussen. Just next to it, just on the left of it, you'll be able to see this white, long, beige building. This is Egved's Pakhus, and if you'll note how elaborately it's decorated on these 2 sides here, and when we're gonna go over to the other side of the building, you'll be able to notice how bare it actually is. It's because back in the day, these 2 sides were the only ones visible from Christiansborg Castle. And since the king couldn't see it from where he stood, it wasn't considered important enough to decorate. So that's why this side is beautifully and elaborately decorated, while the back side of the building is bare as a butt. not saying this because you have to duck down. I guess you can see that it is quite high, this one. But the entire thing is actually quite a controversial build, because back when it was first discussed, it was advertised as this cheap alternative to whatever mechanized monstrosity they were going to make here. Now, it wasn't, and because it was advertised as this, it was the one that the city municipality went forward with. However, it exceeded its budget by about 80 million kroner, or about 11 million euros. So it wasn't as cheap as you might have liked to think. Also, it's a bit controversial because of the very narrow turns on the bridge. And when you're going home from the city on a bike, which a lot of Copenhageners do, and you've maybe drunk like a beer or two, these turns can be very hard to navigate. Fortunately, we have had no major accidents on this bridge yet. Now, in here to our right, you'll be able to see this white, tall building kind of squeezed in between the yellow one on the corner and the brown brick building just to the left of it. This is Nyhavn number 67. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because this building is actually where H.C. Andersen, the Danish author, spent most of his life. He moved to Copenhagen originally to pursue a career in the ballet, but when he traveled here from Odense, a city in Denmark, and he auditioned to the Royal School of Ballet, he was told he was simply too ugly to become a ballet dancer. So that kind of devastated him personally. And instead, luckily for us, he pursued a career as an author, producing many fairy tales which we still know and love. Actually, based on his experiences with the Royal Opera, he was inspired to write one of his most famous adventures, fairy tales yet, the fairy tale of the little ugly duckling. Now, this is going to be the last bridge we're going to cross, so for the last time, I'm going to ask you all to please be seated and keep your arms, heads, legs inside the boat while we're going under. Thank you. Now, we are nearing where our tour began, which also sadly means this tour has come to an end. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you have a lovely stay here in Copenhagen as well. Have a lovely day.